customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DeJulius. This week, John welcomes best-selling author and generational guru Mark Perna. Mark is the founder and CEO of TFS Results, a strategic consulting firm leading the national paradigm shift in education and workforce development. He also serves on the advisory council for the Coalition for Career Development in Washington, D.C. In this episode, you'll discover why Mark believes the younger generations are our best generations. If leaders understand how to lead Generation Zs, they'll know how to lead all generations. The 3 questions every person asks themselves when evaluating if another person truly cares, and the power of the check-in. Now here's your host, John DeJulius.
Hello, revolutionaries, and welcome to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. This week, I'm so excited to have a friend and someone I have so much respect for, Mark Perna, who's the founder and CEO of TFS Results, a strategic consulting firm leading the national paradigm shift in education and workforce development. I've known Mark probably for about 7 years. Have had him speak at the Customer Service Revolution conference a few years ago. He was one of the highest rated speakers we had. And to me, Mark, besides a best-selling author and someone who speaks all over the world constantly, when I think of Mark Perna, I think of the generational guru. I don't know if that's fair. That's a heavy title to give someone, but I want to welcome Mark Perna. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, John. It's wonderful to be here. It's been too long since we've had a chance to sit and talk like this.
Yeah, it has. And I'm excited. You're doing great things. You just got announced that you're on the board. You're going to serve on the advisory council for the Coalition for Career Development in Washington, D.C. What does that mean? What does that look like, Mark?
Well, it's a group of educational leaders as well as employers and associations across America trying to really kind of get our arms around where do we take education, workforce development in this country? How do we connect the pipelines? So it's such an honor to serve in an advisory role to that group to see how we start pushing things forward so that we're building the pipelines into employment in a way that employers are getting everything they need at all levels of education and experience so that we're helping. I mean, as you know, we're in the midst of quite a lot of things going on economically in the country, everything from the supply chain logistics issue, the Great Resignation, all of these things are kind of coming to a head. You know, the skills gap, currently sits at over 11 million open jobs in America that we cannot fill at all levels of education experience. So the Coalition for Career Development is trying to change and create kind of the impetus to change things at the federal and state levels across the country so that we're better connecting the pipelines between education and employment and ultimately economic development for the viability of our communities. So I'm honored to serve on that. And that's what I'm really speaking about all over the nation.
Well, and I think it could not be more timely, or both as a past 3 years, if you will, now, what's been happening, the Great Resignation, the labor shortage, all these things I think it's on the forefront of everyone's mind. It's definitely where we've, probably spending 70% of our consulting is on the employee experience, the recruiting experience, the onboarding experience. And I've gone through, I think, the 7 phases of denial and all these things. And I know a lot of my clients, CEOs have gone through it. You get mad at the labor, and a lot of us like to pick on the 30 and unders, which is, millennials and Zs. And, I always find it funny that why old guys like us our generation pick on them because we're the one that raised them, right? I mean, that doesn't make too much sense, complaining about our kids and then, who's the parent?
They're exactly the way we raise them. I say that to people all the time. I said, if you want to look in the mirror as to why they are the way they are, it's because of us. It's everything that we've passed along to them. But John, I go completely the other way. Most people think in terms of negative, adjectives when they think of younger generations in this country, lazy, entitled, etc. I go completely the other way. When I speak to audiences, I really want them to understand the power of the younger generations. I mean, I think they're extraordinary. I think they're the most incredible generations to come down the pike. I think they're the most intelligent, resourceful, and pit bull-like generations that we've ever seen in this country. When they see something they want in this world, they will move heaven and earth to get it. Our challenge, though, as parents, educators, employers, it's getting them to want something. But once they want something, they're all in, and I think to unleash their passion, purpose, and performance is really connected to the vision of connecting to what they want so that they're willing now to move forward. That's the power.
And I totally agree with you. I love the younger generations. I have probably over 100, 30 and under in all my businesses. And I think they're the best of all the generations I had. What I have found out personally, and tell me if I'm on the right path, they're not willing to trade hours for dollars. But, you make a connection to their job, to the overall purpose and tie it to the brand. They will make bigger sacrifices and give up better deals on paper than our generation would have.
John, it's so true, because to me, it's the pride of their contribution has to add to a greater good. And so the vision and the purpose and the mission of the organization has to add something to the community, has to give back in some way. Because if you make it transactional, I'm going to give you some money, you're going to give me some time, you're going to have a revolving door in and out of your organization like this, because they're really searching for the pride of their contribution has to add to a greater good. And the greater good cannot be shareholder value and simply making money. It can't be that we're going to have a 12% jump this year. And whereas that might be important, that might be one of the goals, it cannot be the goal in their mind. They've got to add to something that's greater than that. And frankly, I think that's an extraordinary way to look at life, because I think it's going to make older generations like you and I and employers across the country really take a serious look at what are we really trying to accomplish, and are we doing something bigger than just making money and increasing shareholder value?
And that's it. I as we talked, in November was our customer service revolution, and my theme was the great retention, right? Turning the great resignation into great retention. And I said, where it started to fall apart, I think, was, Milton Friedman's statement that the purpose of business is to increase shareholder wealth. And that came out in the 1970s. And then you saw a lot of crappy things. And the movie Wolf of Wall Street or Wall Street, I mean, those weren't, just fictional. Those were based on real stories. And, then you got the Travis Kalanick's and Uber and Theranos, and a lot of greed happened. And to me, the way I see it, and then as you know, CEO income has gone up 350%, while minimum wage didn't move for 15 years, right? And so this is more probably of a therapy session than it is a podcast, Mark, because I got all these things going on through my mind, both as a business owner and as a consultant. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. And that's really where I want to talk to you, to see what I got right and what I got wrong with this whole generational thing. So I was all good with everything. And I feel as business leaders, we need to do better. Employees just deserve better. And that the Great Resignation was not an indictment on employees, like you said, entitled, lazy. No, it was an indictment on, I think what we got, leaders got a little fat and content and took our eye off the ball. So, but here's where I for a brief time, I got angry like everyone else. And it was probably about 3-4 months ago when quiet quitting really, hit the thing. And so I started, well, what's this quiet quitting? And, I was writing a blog to kind of set the younger generation straight, and that if you don't, do more, you will never get more. And then I researched, hustle, the word hustle got canceled. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, why would that get canceled? Like, that's what made me and you where we are today.
Yeah, that's right.
And so
in fact, we're still doing it, John.
Right. So luckily I did research, and this is where I want you to correct me what I got right and what I got wrong. When I did the research on quiet quitting and hustle culture, what I found was that, the younger generation saw what their parents and grandparents went through, right? And there's the old quote, Mark, that we've probably both have lived our life by. If you want autonomy and a better quality of life in your 50s and 60s, you can't have it in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? And that's true. That's true. But so when I look at the millennials and they've seen their parents, grandparents work their asses off, and maybe it didn't it didn't financially benefit them, or maybe it did for guys like me and you. There still is casualties. There are still, losses along the way of the life balance. And so I started thinking, hey, that's okay for them. If they don't want that, that's kind of their way of telling our generation, hey, that was all good for you, but that's not what we want. And who are we to say that they're wrong, right? Who are we to say that, no, you should give up a good marriage and forfeit seeing your kids' activities and climb that corporate ladder at any expense to wake up one day and potentially have those other things eroded? So I don't know. Do I have it right? What did I get right? What did I get wrong with that?
No, I think you've got it right, John. And so let me kind of unpack some of what you said there, because the power of truly understanding younger generations in this country is understanding how exceptional that they can be, and what they are looking for out of life is different than older generations. It's not all I want to be a millionaire and do all these things. They want experiences, but they're willing to take a lower key to increase the number of experiences they have. A lot of young people today want smaller homes because they'd rather spend money and invest in experiences and travel, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, my take on quiet quitting, and I write weekly for Forbes, and I've just exceeded past 3.3 million readers at Forbes. I wrote an article on quiet quitting, and my quiet quitting.
I love that article. I love the article.
Did you yeah, it was a little bit of a different article.
Yeah, I think that's what inspired me to reach out to you, because, you're not jumping on the bandwagon, beating them up. You're making us pause and see it from their perspective. So please share.
Yeah. And so for me,
I'm going to include that article in the show notes with your website.
That would be great. I got so many, pieces of feedback on the article, because my contention was I encourage my team every day to quiet quit. I look at it as a positive. I don't think it's a negative. I think people are quiet quitting, and it certainly has a negative connotation because, they're willing to be.
I think the title is what sends people wrong, because when you hear that, I think you're doing the least, but I don't, correct me. I think I'm just setting boundaries, Mark, that, 9 p.m. on the weekends or evenings, that's for me and my family time, and respect that. I'm not like, Bob in accounting that, will answer your call at 3 a.m. or something. To me, that's what I think the title quiet quitting is misleading.
And exactly, it's more transactional based, right? I'm going to do this for that, and boy, I'm going to draw a line in the sand and say I'm not crossing this line for you, because I don't buy into the vision of where we're going and how this adds to any greater good. So when I wrote the article, I've got a pretty good sized crew of people that support what I do across North America, and in 25 years, I have never fired, and no one's ever left me. Now, granted, I don't have hundreds of employees and I don't have thousands of employees, but that's not nothing.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so, but the way we get there is I encourage all of my people. I have set a culture in my leadership style that I want them to live their best life. And I tell them all up front. I said, family first. Do what you've got to do. You got to be at a game, be at a game. You got to be at a doctor, be at a doctor. You need to take your folks somewhere, take your folks somewhere. Whatever you need to do, go and do it, and work what we do. I get them all to buy into the vision of where we're going. We have a shared purpose, and everybody is all in on that shared purpose. But go quiet quit. I didn't know the term at the time, because it's maybe 4 or 5 months old that quiet quitting became the term. But I've been asking my people to quiet quit for years. Just look, stop at some point. Because what I have found in my organization is when the vision is strong, when people buy into the shared vision, it transcends the transactional nature of a typical employment relationship. They're willing to step beyond and do whatever is necessary to get the job done. And I don't manage the amount of vacation my team takes. I don't manage whether they take long weekends. I tell them, take what you need to take, do what you need to do, because I feel comfortable in the vision that was created so that they could quiet quit and do whatever they needed to do. And that has locked them in. But I'll tell you what I have recognized. My team works nights, weekends, holidays, vacation times. I am urgently telling them, when you're on vacation, try to take vacation, but they still check in. They still are engaged. Right. They're still bought in to exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And so it's an extraordinary balance. But to me, quiet quitting, if you look at it in a positive and you work with your organization in a positive way, that could be something that entices and attracts more right people into the right positions in your company, because they are so desperate to be a part of all of it. Like you, John, you probably get this all the time too, because you speak all over the nation and all over the place. And so people come up to me, as I'm sure they come up to you, and like, do you have any openings? Are you hiring? Is there a way I could be a part of your organization? And it's glorifying. And I'm honored that they do that. And it's humbling that they do that. But people are looking for a home. They're looking for this not to be transactional. And if you can set yourself up in that way, it's an extraordinary advantage.
Yeah. And, one of the benefits of the pandemic, and there's benefits in everything, is I think it's brought the relevancy of purpose back to the world. Because, again, when the busy bus is here and maybe it's the holidays and it's your busiest time, or what we've experienced in the past 12 years is a great economy, you can take your eye off the ball because you're busy in spite of what you're doing, right? And so, and what I used to say, which will lead into another area of the differences between the generations, because, when you're a leader, you're looking at it and saying, oh my God, there's 5-6 generations in the workforce today. And I literally have to be a person with 5 or different personality. How do I manage 5 or 6 generations? And how do I know what motivates him versus her and all those things? But the quote before the pandemic that I used to always hear is, the currency for millennials is purpose, right? And I love that. And I agree with that. I actually feel that it's changed. And to me, throw out the word millennials or Zs, and currency for employees is purpose. And where I'll really, get into this is, I'm sure you've heard, we've all heard about the percentage of people that when they retire, there's a significant, I don't know if it's 12% or 25%, but it's still significant, that die prematurely because they kind of lost their, and I don't want, like you, I don't want my employees to be tied just to their work purpose, but it does show you the value that work serves in our life. And something I read, which was really shocking to me the other day in a study, that 89% of the people who retire at 55 die within 10 years.
Wow.
Compared to the people that die at 65. Right? I mean, that's scary. And again, I think that really shows that this purpose thing isn't just for kids. It isn't just for younger generations. It is a part of our identity.
Well, I tell people this all the time, John. You probably get this question too. People ask me, so Mark, when do you want to retire? Like, what's your end game? And I'm like, retire? It's taken me 35 years to become an overnight success. Are you kidding me? I've waited 35 years to get to this point where I am sought after all over the nation. And I'm like, I'm not ready to give that up. I'm just like, this is the good time. This is like, this is the stuff where it's gratifying. And I can't play golf that many times in a week. I can't go out eating and drinking and I have so many wonderful friends who are retired and I watch them have the greatest time and it's wonderful. But I'm like, I love what I do every day. It's what lights me up. So yeah, purpose is a key part of the long term. I don't see myself, retiring, so to speak. I see myself maybe 10, 15 years down the road, slowing down a smidge and balancing it a little better. But I want to have
a minimum of 32 more years. I tell people 32 more years before I'd even consider, because my goal is to speak on stage at 90 for $90,000. So I got
That's the
30
goal.
years to work. Yeah, work.
I
on
like
it.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that. So
if
it's a
anybody
dollar.
wants to-
It's a grand per age. I like that. I like that a lot. I do. Can I borrow that? I really
Yeah.
like that a lot, John.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. So Mark, so how do we help leaders navigate through all their different generations of in their workforce?
John, it's such a great question, and it's one that I'm dealing with all over the nation, and it's really getting simpler. There was a time where you had to sit down and you had to understand, kind of like you said a moment ago, you had to understand, like, what are baby boomers thinking, and what makes them tick, and then Gen X, and then Gen Y, millennials, and then Gen Z. And then not only did you have to understand them, but there were people who were writing books and stuff on cuspers, people who are in between, they're on the young end, this or the top end of that. And I'm like, I am now working around the country where you don't really need to understand what every generation is thinking, because for the first time really in history, if you can understand Generation Z, 8 to 25 years old, if you can understand what they think, what makes them tick, and how they make decisions, and if you can really deep dive in understanding the power of a human connection in their life, the power of understanding how lifestyle is more important than career decisions, that career decisions are actually lifestyle decisions. And if you can understand, how they put together, why they need positive attention, and how they will seek negative attention in lack of positive attention, what comes through the conduit of a human connection. If you can understand how all this plays together, if you can react and adapt to be great at Gen Z, it works for every older generation, every single one of them. Because everybody wants a deeper human connection. Everybody has 3 questions that they ask all the time. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? And if one of those answers to a young person in this country today is no, you have lost them. You'll have a difficult time getting them back. And that includes in your home, classroom, or place of business. So understanding the power of, they are thinking to themselves, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? And if the answer is no, for an employee, for a student, and for someone in your own home, you've disconnected. So the answer to all 3 of those questions has to be yes. And then, you can deep dive into, how you build the empathetic communication, the active listening, questioning, how you can do check-ins, how you can validate their circumstances. Every young person today wants to tell you a story. They want to tell you what's going on in their life. They have to be able to tell that story. You don't have to agree with it. You may not be able to help them, but you have to be able to hear the story, because there's 2 words they all want to hear. I understand. They have to know you understand, and to validate their circumstances means, man, I understand that's got to be tough. That's got to be challenging. And then moving them from there and helping them take that next step. So there's lots of things like that, and understanding what they think, what makes them tick. But that's, I think, makes it easier today for employers and educators and community leaders to recognize, if you can adapt to the sweet spot of Generation Z, it works for everybody.
Interested in bringing John or the DeJulius Group team to work with your team? Message us today to schedule a keynote, workshop to create your own customer experience action statement, or a full consulting project. Email claudia@thedejuliusgroup.com to get started.
A lot of great stuff. So 3 questions every person is asking. Let me make sure I tee it up. They're asking who their leader is. What's the best way to phrase that?
John, actually, every interaction. So whether they're talking to their parents, whether they're talking to a teacher, whether they're talking to an employer, a supervisor. Do you see me?
Do you hear me? And do I matter? I love that. And I love the I understand. And, you bring up something that, they want to tell a story. And, there's a couple things here. In my last book, The Relationship Economy, I talked about doctors interrupt their patients on average within 18 seconds. And you think about why a lot of people say, because they're booked too busy. But I think one of the reasons why, but then I realized I do this, I bet you do this, and I think anyone that's an expert at what they do it is, Mark, you've been running, let's say, and I know you've lost, how much weight have you lost, Mark?
I've lost 75 pounds during the pandemic years. Yeah.
That's incredible. And unfortunately, this is not a video podcast, so people won't see how Brad Pitt you are. But yeah, you look great. So what did you do? I know you were biking a lot. Any of it running?
Yeah, I didn't do any running. It was
Okay.
all biking. Watching my diet,
Yeah.
but Peloton during the
I
winter,
love
and
Peloton.
then on a carbon fiber bike where I would ride 26 to 40 miles, after
Yeah.
work or on the weekends, and it's wonderful. I love it.
So let's say Mark goes in to see his doctor. Doctor's like, what's going on? Mark says, I've been riding every day, 100 miles a week, whatever you were doing or are doing, and your knee's killing you and it's swelling. And the doctor's probably going to jump in and say, well, Mark, I got it. You've been overtraining, you have inflammation. Here's what you need, right? And so I started thinking about that. And I said, I do that. I'm sure you do it. After I speak, and you get the people that come up to you and they want to tell you about something that's happening in their world and customer service. And, they say, well, we got this problem. And rarely, if ever, Mark, in the past 25 years, have I heard a scenario or a question I haven't heard many times before. So I will jump in because I want to give you the answer and say, here's what you do. Here's what you do. You got to, crawl, walk, and run. You got to, blah, blah, blah. And I started realizing, I think we all do that. And, we're so quick to help. But you said something that's really important, that people like to share their burden. I want to tell you what's going on in my work, even though
they want to tell you the story
a million times before. I don't need to feel that you've heard this a million times ago. That doesn't make me feel special or good. And I want to get that off my chest so you can truly empathize, even though you know the answer, And so even from a customer service, but you made me think of it as a leadership too, because I'm sure we do this with our employees. I do this with my employees. My employees will come in, they have a problem. I cut them off and say, listen, you need the weekend off. You got the weekend, right? Or, work harder, or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And cutting them off, because I think, the advice is more important. And sometimes, as you know, the advice is probably the last thing they want to, they just want to share their burden with someone.
Last week I was in San Antonio, Texas, speaking to the top 100 K-12 suburban superintendents in the country. And I spent 4 hours with them. And we got to this point, the exact point you and I are talking about. And I was talking about, the power of active listening, active questioning, being eye to eye and belly to belly, the power of it. And John, you experience this. I experience this because we're speakers, right? We go out, we do our thing, and people line up after we speak and they want to chat with us, right? I mean, there's always this group of people who, and it's so humbling.
Oh my God,
it's a great thing, right? And I know you feel the same way. We've talked about it, right? So here's this group of 20 people that come up afterwards, and they want their moment with us, and they're fans, and they loved what we said, or they want to share. And how many of them want to share their story, right? You and I said something, and they want to come up and they go, I've also got a kid who does this, or I've also got, right? And they all want to share their story. I told these superintendents, I go, how many of you are so overbooked? How many of you do not allow the space and the time to look into the eye of the person that needs to tell you this story? It's a need of theirs. They want to share. They want to tell you this. Yeah. And when in those moments after a presentation, John, that it can almost be uncomfortable, because when you've got 20 people that want you and one person standing in front of you, and that person is giving you their time, and it's easy to immediately look beyond that person to the rest of the people who are waiting.
Yeah.
And I told these superintendents, I said, how often do you do that when you go to a building? How often do you do that when you're walking around? Are you in the moment with the person sharing the story, or are you constantly searching for the next thing because you're you think you're being efficient, you think you're being productive, you think you're cutting the curve, but what you're really communicating to the person in front of you is you're not that important.
Right.
And that is killing the human connection. And I say the same thing to teachers. How many of you as teachers with 30 kids in your classroom are doing the same thing? As employers, how many of you are managing 12 people?
We're doing it to our kids. And Mark, quite frankly, I do it, we do it to our customers, right? So you come in, you had a bad experience, and I want to be the hero. Mark, I'm refunding your money, and your next one's free. And I think I'm doing you a favor, but you wanted to tell me, the inconvenience caused, how this affected. You had to go on the road that night, get on a plane. You weren't able to get what you needed. Yeah, and now you had to wait a week before you got back. And I'm just trying to help you. And I'm expediting it. Mark, I totally understand. Here's what we're going to do for you. But I didn't
want to solve your problem as fast as I can, right?
You wanted to pass the burden of what you experienced on to me. And we have to do that. We have to be that channel of allowing our kids, our employees, our customers, anyone to get it off their chest, right? To feel heard, even though our solution may not have changed from what it was 18 seconds ago or 8 minutes ago. Let it be heard and say, Mark, now you're done. And Mark, I feel I'm so sorry. That was horrible. And here's what I'm going to do for you. And same solution, but he's going to be a lot happier.
But in validating the circumstance, that's what they're really looking for. They're looking for, because I think your solution is a great one, right? I'm going to take care of this. You're not going to pay for it. You're not going to pay, and the next one is free.
Right.
That's great at the very end of that conversation.
Yes.
After you say, I understand, that's got to be hard, or that must have been horrible for you, or like, I can truly appreciate how that must stink. And like, oh man, our bad. They want to hear that you understood, you got that it was horrible, and now you can solve the problem and they'll feel great about it. And that's how you create the customer for life, or the student for life, or the connection, the human connection. I'll go one step a little further. So I try to teach people how to do the power of a check-in. Check-in is a simple thing. It's an easy thing. So if I've got little Johnny DeJulius, right? He's in my classroom, or he's an employee, or he's working for me part-time or whatever. A check-in to me is a very simple thing. You walk up, you tap someone on the shoulder. That's the way I would do it, because I'm just that kind of a guy, right? So I come up to little Johnny DeJulius. I tap you on the shoulder. I go, Johnny, everything okay today? Yeah, everything's good. I'm like, is there anything I can do to support you? No, I'm good. Here's the power of the check-in. And this is where everybody misses. Then just walk away. Like literally just walk away. See, what most people do is they'll walk up to little John DeJulius and they'll tap him on the shoulder and say, everything okay? Yeah, everything's good. Like, anything I can do to support you? No, I'm fine. Good. By the end of the day, I need you to do the following 2 things. Now, that completely negates the human connection built in the check-in, right? Because I was clearly checking in.
You had a hidden agenda.
I had a hidden agenda for the check-in.
Right.
And I tell people, go up, do the check-in. You could do 15, 20, you could do 30 of these a day. They take 2 seconds, right? And someone goes, yeah, no, I'm good. Like, anything I can do to support you? Nope. Got it. Great. Walk away. The discipline's in walking away. If you need someone to do something, those 2 things by the end of the day, go back an hour later and deal with those. Do them in a separate communication and a conversation. I said the human connection goes up. You have built trust and respect. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? The check-in answers all of that.
I love that. And one of the things that was on my list to bring up is, from my vantage point, there's 2 new leadership skills that leaders need to have. That, to me, first time ever in the history of leading millions of years, right? And no classroom, no leadership training has ever prepared our current and future generations of leaders for this. The 2 new skill sets is, and you just hit on one of them, leading from a distance, right? We've never had to worry about that before. The belly to belly, the eye to eye. And as you know, relationships and emotional equity is born out of, rabbit holes, Keurig conversations, hallway collisions. And we work together, and you're getting your Keurig and I'm waiting behind you. I'm like, Mark, what do you got going on this weekend? And it could be a celebration of one of your kids doing something great, or it could be something that deserves my condolences, or anything in between. Or you're screwed. You're working all weekend because you have a project Monday that you're in over your head, right? All those things allow for me to say, Mark, I've worked with, 5 clients that you're working with. I have all that already. Or Mark, I'm so sorry. Or Mark, my son has struggled with similar things that you might be sharing with me. But Zoom doesn't allow for that, right? We have a 30-minute meeting, an hour meeting, 10 people on it. Boom, boom. Come on, we got to go. We're not getting to, we're going to run late, or we're going to, cut off. And it doesn't allow for those innocuous conversations for me as your leader, whatever that looks like, to show you that I'm vulnerable. I'm a human being and not just your boss. and that I care, right? And then the other thing, so leading from a distance is a new leadership skill set. And please expand and tell me, more, or if I'm missing anything. The second thing that's a completely new thing that we've never had to worry about is employee wellness, right? Mental wellness. To a certain degree, a tongue in cheek. Not that I have to be a therapist, but I have to recognize if you have something going on in your world and offer resources. I don't have to be that, but say, hey, Mark, we can help. Or here's the thing. The other thing that is, if Mark isn't struggling with it, okay, someone in his family is. And Mark might not know how to help his wife or kids through that. And if we can help you, and basically, if someone in Mark's immediate family is struggling from it, he's struggling from it, right? I mean, so everyone is struggling from the mental wellness, that's the cause. So, I think that I love your check-in, because that is an example. And whether that's in Zoom, whether that's in anything, just one-on-one, and just say, Mark, how you doing? No, Mark, how are you really doing? And just shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. And the follow-up question should always be, and is there anything I can do to support you?
Yeah.
Because again, that demonstrates that we're in this together, right? We're partners in this business model, in this shared vision and journey. In your first point, so I have to do a lot of things still virtually via Zoom. I consult with organizations in Hawaii, Alaska. I mean, I've got a lot of breadth to what I'm doing and the people that I work with. So a lot of my consulting these days is virtual. And so what I've had to teach people and get them to understand that, in this hybrid model, and in some cases in virtual with your employees, little things are ways you can build a human connection. So my entire team at this point is virtual. We were virtual before it was cool and sexy to be virtual. Before the pandemic made us all have to be virtual, we went virtual. And so when we start, our meetings, I call it going around the horn. And, and I've got a good sized team, so it takes a moment. But when we only meet one time a month, that's it. We meet for 3 hours, one time a month. We schedule it, a year in advance. We have it all laid out, because we do not believe in meetings for meeting's sake. We believe in productivity, being prepared, and let's rock and roll. But I start every meeting in the first, everybody's got 60 seconds. And in 60 seconds, what's great, what's going on, personal, professional, whatever you would like to share it, because we are all in this together. And people share the most wonderful things about their life. What's new, what's cool, what's fun, what's everything. We go around the horn, then we get in, we do the business, bang, 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 bang. And my favorite thing at the end of every meeting is we go back around the horn. I want to know any aha moments that you had, or anything about the meeting that really resonated with you. Boom. And I always start. And if you notice, John, where people are going to be listening to us, but even this entire time you and I have been talking, where have my eyes been? I have been scope locked on the camera, looking directly at you. Now, your picture is actually below the camera level. So I am peripherally seeing you, but I am looking into the camera because I want to make sure that I am completely engaged, eye to eye and belly to belly, even in a Zoom. And I do this when I present, I do this in a meeting, I do this everywhere I go, and people are remarkably riveted by the fact, and I'm teaching them how to do this. It's a simple thing, but it's like, learn to look into the camera, look to go eye to eye and belly to belly with people, because as most people look at you, I could look at, yesterday I did a keynote speech that was virtual. I had to do it in Oregon. The only way for us to do it was virtual. And so I had, 80 some folks there. And I asked them all to please turn on your cameras, please, coordinate in the chat. And I spoke for 2 hours straight, no break. Everybody was completely in.
Yeah.
And that's just not happening. But if you look into the camera, you bring it to life, people will be engaged. But those are the tools I use from a virtual and a hybrid perspective that allow you to lead from the distance you're talking about. In your second point, one of the things we did this year, and I don't share this out, but I really wanted to do something special this year at bonus and salary discussion and reviews. And we do it in December every year. And this year I did something that I've never done before, but I wanted to do something where people could do things with their families. And I wanted to extend what we do as a company to their families, and then families and beyond to their neighbors if they wanted to. And in addition, this year, I gave everybody $250 to do whatever random acts of kindness they want to do. And it was funded by me. They didn't have to report it. They didn't have to tell me what they did. They could do it anonymously. If they wanted to do 250 things at $1 a piece, that was up to them. If they wanted to do one grandiose thing for $250 a piece, they could do that. They could add to it. They could get their neighbors involved. What I wanted to create, and I told everybody, was have a conversation with your family. How would we use this? How will we take this and do something meaningful in someone else's life? And it was an extraordinary thing that brought us together, that people really were moved by the gesture of doing it. And then the ability for them to come up and be creative about how it was done. And they didn't have to report out and give me an accounting, nothing like that. And yet people shared the things that they did and how they did it.
Mark, what we teach, that you're doing is, so this won't be a shock to you, but world-class customer service companies have the lowest employee turnover and the highest employee morale. And on surface, you're like, why? If I'm taking care of the client, why would that make my job more fulfilling? Well, there's parts that are obvious. If less clients are beating me up and I don't have to hide behind policy and I have the autonomy to make it right, there's some value there. But also, do we think the Ritz-Carlton never drops? No, they drop the ball. The difference is that they're empowered to make it right and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Perna, but we're fully committed tonight. We don't have your reservations, but I booked and paid for your room across the street at the Marriott. And you're like, now you're more impressed with the Ritz-Carlton than had they had. But my point that you are doing for your employees, that great leaders do, is you're helping them be day makers, okay? You're encouraging, you're fostering them to be day maker. And I don't care who you are, whenever I've made someone's day, paid for their toll behind me, I've never met them before, hey, pay for the next 3 cars, right? Put a quarter in a meter so you don't get it, whatever that looks like. At the end of the day, you know who feels the best? Me. The day maker, right?
Absolutely.
I was a hero and that guy doesn't even know I have helped them avoid getting a parking ticket, right? But I feel good. And so you're creating that. I love what you just did there. That's what the best companies do, is they empower that. And it kind of creates, this positive peer pressure that I want to outdo you. I love what you did with your $250, but I think I could, have more impact, right? And that's so cool.
And I wanted it to become a topic of conversation amongst people as they saw fit to have the conversation. Again, I didn't want to drive that. I almost never bring it up because I don't want people to feel obligated to talk about it. But in that natural, genuine, authentic kind of way, I wanted people to kind of be, this is what we did. I'm like, that's a great idea. We did something like that. And it was like, I wanted it to be a topic of conversation that just genuinely and authentically comes up, and it drives and it brings us closer together. Because again, even in that, it's a shared purpose. It's another way that we can give back, where the pride of their contribution adds to a greater good, and people can connect in that way.
That's so cool. All right, Mark. So the leaders are still, frustrated. We certainly aren't past the great resignation. There's a labor shortage, whatever we want to call it. What's, 1 or 2 things that you would tell a leader to do to build a brand that instead of looking for great employees, build the culture that great employees seek out, right? So if I'm a leader, how do I get my employees more engaged? How do I hopefully reduce the great resignation in my world from happening? And how do I keep them motivated? And maybe this is the same or a different question. And how do I get new employees bought in?
It's a great question, John. It's in the power of the human connection and understanding that you have to, in some way, shape, or form, answer this question: why would anyone do this? I tell teachers this. I tell employers this. If you're asking someone to do a role, you have to answer proactively for yourself. Why would anyone do this? Like, what's the big picture? What can they do? Where can they go? How can they get there? What is in it for them? How do you create the impression, the contribution, the things that are necessary so that there's an intrinsic value on the position itself, so that as you look for attracting and then ultimately retaining into that, the human connection you develop in the recruitment process has to be the same. That's phase 1 of retention. I usually tell people, recruitment is less important than retention, because if you understand the power of retention, you recognize that recruitment is just phase one of retention, because it's the relationship you build in recruitment that you carry into retention.
Yeah, retention's an outcome.
Well, absolutely. But what makes retention is the outcome for the individual and how they see what they're accomplishing in their life. So what is their light at the end of their tunnel? And I talk about that strategy and concept all the time, which is, how for them to be able to step through the tunnel, we have to recognize as employers and educators, et cetera, and community leaders even, is that there has to be an intrinsic value for someone to take the first step, and then the next step, the next step, the next step. Well, why is anyone? Because the tunnel is the work, the labor, the effort, the skill development, whatever it is that's the work. For someone to do the work, there has to be a powerful outcome at the end for the individual. What is their lifestyle? What does their career look like? What are they getting out of this? How is this adding to how they deal with their family and their interactions? All of that is personal. It's got to be personal. Well, that's the human connection. And when I talk about younger generations, I always get to a part of my presentations where I say, a lot of you may be thinking to yourself now, as I lay out younger generation, you might be thinking to yourself, man, it sounds like we have to kiss young people's butts today.
Right.
I'm like, no, actually, on the contrary, and the complete opposite. I think we should hold young people to higher expectations. I think we need to push them further and faster. I think we need to be tough on them, but you can't do that without a human connection. Because if you do that without the conduit of a human connection, there's a word for that. And the word is jerk. You're a jerk. But if you have a human connection, you can push people further and faster. You can hold them to higher expectations, and you can be tough on them because you're coming from a position of connection and trying to drive that. And if you recognize what's important to them, you can connect the dots all the way through and unleash their passion, purpose, and performance.
I love that. Man, you nailed it. You crushed it. This is exactly why I wanted to talk to you. You are the generational guru. I hope you don't mind that one of those many.
I appreciate you adding that to my title. I like that, John.
Yeah. So, Mark, well, I'm going to include all this in the show notes. The best place to go for your website is
markcperna.com. C is my middle initial, so it's MARKC, P as in Peter, ERNA.com. And someone can look me up and see what I'm doing there. And
that's where our revolutionaries can find your book, Answering Why.
Answering Why. It's a #1 bestseller, won 8 National Book Awards. I'm very proud of it.
I know. That's great. It's been so awesome, Mark, to see you explode onto the scene in the past. I mean, you have just skyrocketed. It hasn't been that long. But seeing you now, it feels like, how you've been doing this 15, 20 years and you've just lit it up. And it's so great to see. And I think what you're bringing to the world right now has never been more important. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, John. And thank you so much for being there when you and I met for the first time back a number of years ago. And you really helped me by understanding, what it takes to publish a book and all of those things. And I'll never forget that conversation in your conference room. And so you were very gracious and very generous with your time with me. It's such an honor to see you, flourishing and thriving and building and expanding and doing the things that you're doing. Really awesome.
And I did that because so many did it for me, long before me. I couldn't believe how generous people were. And like you, their generosity helped me get to where they were in half the time, right? Because not only did they tell me what to do, they told me what not to do that slowed them down. And, avoiding to step on the same landmines is better than, any best practice you could hear. So it's been really exciting. I'm sure you're doing it for a lot of
and I love doing it. Yeah, I love doing it.
All right, Mark Perna, thank you so much. It was great to have you. Thank you, Revolutionaries, for another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I'm Denise Thompson, managing partner of the DeJulius Group, and I invite you to send us your questions, post a review, and let us know what you liked and want to hear more of. We're happy that you're part of the Customer Service Revolution and encourage you to subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. You'll find us on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast station.